This is Vijay Lakshmi Nanda, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi Nanda. Dr. Nanda is teaching in Miranda House of Delhi University. Besides teaching, she has taken keen interest on the social issues, especially she has done well by running a campaign against female feticide, and she keeps writing on different issues, particularly on women's issues and gender empowerment. We decided to have this session with her.
I think in contemporary India we are living in really changing times. We have a number of opportunities. Young people want to claim their bit of the sky, their half of the sky. They want to access their constitutional guarantees. But on the other side, we have declining child sex ratio. We have the the practice of terminating pregnancies if they are found to be female. So we do have a paradox in India at this point. We have lots of opportunities which young people want to avail, and young women are at that particular point when they want to access all the resources around them. But on the other hand, they are not even allowed to be born. So when you live in such a paradoxical society, there is also the chance of a huge backlash against women. So you are seeing increase in rape, increase in forms of sexual harassment, increase in also murders of young women at the time of marriage or even later on. So and workplace also there's a lot of violence. So when you're living in such changing times, this particular backlash not only gets reflected in the local media, it's all over in the global media. So the emergence is of a contemporary India which is really brutal to its women. I think it's time we took action. It is a national emergency that women in India want their rights, and their rights begin from the time of their birth to their death. So if we are not able to guarantee women the rights that the Constitution actually grants them, then it is a concern not just for the women in India but for the rest of the society. So I think it's time that we take stock of the huge amount of violence that Indian women face, and irrespective of those obstacles, they want to access their rights. So while realizing that the government does have a number of laws, but it is at the level of implementation that we need to put our strengths. We need to kind of see to it that implementation of these laws is possible. India is a legal paradise when it comes to women. So why are these laws not delivering? That is what we need to ask at this point of time. And not only do we need to ask this question to the policy makers, we need to ask it to all other kinds of structures and systems that are in place. So I think it's time that we act. Otherwise, we probably will not be able to call ourselves a democracy anymore.
Very well said, Vijay Lakshmi, because yes, India is a paradise of laws, but still the lawlessness is prevalent all over in the cities, in the rural areas, in small towns, everywhere. So much about India, but do you think that, as they say, catch them young, the first important problem that we notice in today's system is that the families start discriminating against a girl child, then schools start doing it, and the society does it. The media and the films, they project the women very differently than the male counterparts. So do you think that there is a case for taking a lead by everyone instead of the he for she or him or all kinds of feminist things which will only be lip sympathy?
Yes, I think it's time that all stakeholders play a role in this, and it has to start from the family, or even before the family, I guess. If there is one, if you're looking at conception, you're looking at larger issues around even birth. So I think it's not just, you begin with the family, but then you move on to schools, you move on to other forms of higher educational institutions, colleges, universities, or to the workplace. But I think the point here is that we need to engage with them through the education system. So it's not that just the school and the pedagogy needs to be looked at. Also the kind of curriculum that we are engaging with needs to be looked at. And if you are able to do that even at a young age, that would be a major kind of a thrust. And that should be a major kind of thrust. We are always debating on how history is to be, taught in schools, but we never talk about how gender is to be taught at school. So talking about gender right from the time when they go to school is very, very important. And I think at that level, and even at the senior levels, even at college levels or the university levels, and all kinds of education, not just within the humanities, but within, let's say, the engineering sciences, within medical sciences, we need to keep talking about gender equality. It's very important that it becomes the core kind of value that is imparted right from childhood. That's important. The other thing is that gender doesn't really, it's not just about women, it's also about men. We need to talk about power structures, and we need to engage both men and women into it. So it's important that we start young, but we also start at parallel levels. So you start at school levels, but you also talk to teachers, you also talk to parents, you also talk to authorities who are there. So I think at parallel levels, number of things needs to be done. And I think the police, the judiciary, the doctors, the lawyers, all of them need to be talking about it.
Okay, that sums up the role in the holistic manner. But do you think that discrimination comes from within the family at the young age because of the kind of the circumstances and the environment prevails in the society, because girls are vulnerable? So from the very beginning, the parents think that you should have these do's and don'ts, which is not true of the boys. So apart from of course, the power structure, do you think that it has a relationship?
The power structure is the patriarchy, one can call it. It is the ideological consciousness that is found everywhere. So whether it's the media that represents women, whether it is the market that brings in consumer products, almost all of that is based on that ideological consciousness of patriarchy. But I think you made an important point here about how we need to approach. What's the best way to approach this issue? How should we do it? And is it insecurity of families that is making them set a do's and don'ts? It could be possible that there is insecurity in India which is coming from a cultural context and also coming from a context where public spaces are not safe. But I think it's time that we do not keep the women inside, but rather we make the public spaces very safe. And that can only come about by putting in our resources in such a way that there is equality in terms of seeing safety as an issue which is important not just for the safety of women but for the safety of humankind. But if you see the way in which we define safety, even if you ask a man about safety, he will say, I find that place safe because there are more women in that space. So I think we never understand that gender equality is not necessarily only for women, but also in a larger sense for both men and women. So I think the emphasis on safety and security has to be from that angle, that a place has to be safe for everybody to inhabit it. And when you look at child sexual abuse, for example, it's not just young girls who are going to be abused, it's also young boys. So I think there is a need for us to engage it not from seeing women as beneficiaries, but looking at the larger the larger understanding around violence, the larger understanding about security, about safety. It has to come from there. It has to come from a understanding of human rights. So it's a violation of human rights that you keep girls inside the house and you think that the public spaces are going to be safe. In fact, on the contrary, places where there are less women, they have become very violent. In China, it has become very violent. In India also, the social fabric, the violence that you see, school teachers have actually told us that they have found the classrooms far more violent, far more noisy, far difficult to control because there are more boys in the classroom than girls. So the sense of a harmonious social development is only possible if there are more women or equal number of women in the population, because I think safety, security, social harmony comes in by that kind of a component.
Okay, that brings another question in my mind. In the schools, in particular, the private schools, which are the trend these days, at least in the towns and urban areas, most of the teachers are women. How come they are not able to teach good gender practices to the students?
That again, I think I mentioned that the pedagogy and curriculum needs to be changed. We need to have, just by the sheer fact of being a woman does not necessarily make you gender sensitive. Gender sensitivity has to be imparted, and it has to be imparted to you through an understanding that comes in from either from the family or from a curriculum that you're exposed to. So I think the emphasis should be on developing a good module of gender sensitivity, gender awareness, which pedagogically should be given to teachers, and then they can impart it. So the sense of gender sensitivity can only develop through not just one-off training, but continuous training and sustainable training. I think it's very important that all service providers, whether it is teachers or it is bureaucrats or it is police, they have to undergo compulsory gender training. And that gender training has to come in through a module which is tried and tested and which is audited and which is, I think, made accountable through some experts. It cannot just come in like that. And that has to be over a period of time. And it has to be continuous. That is why the way young men who are not going to school and they are sitting at home, and then you see these little children, little girls being raped and abused, that is coming in from an understanding that these young boys and girls, not just the girls, I mean the poor girls also have no way of knowing about sexual abuse, but even these 17-year-old, 16-year-old boys have not been taught anything about sexual rights, about, which should be such a huge component of adolescent education. So exposing them, making them understand, I think there should be much more work on prevention rather than just punitive measures, which is not working.
All right. One thing that is missing in this part of the world, which is prevalent and tested well elsewhere, is the globally, something that was also supported by UNESCO and other UN bodies and international organizations, is the health promoting schools.
Yes.
So if you have health promoting schools, the concept is that once you have health literate child in the family, he or she will educate the rest, and tomorrow when they are future family owners or senior members of the family will be health literate. So do you think that health promoting school should have a component on gender sensitivity?
Yes, definitely. Definitely we should have a sustainable program, and there should be emphasis on it, and it should be an emphasis that should come from the top echelons of society, and there should be accountability. I think accountability is extremely important, because we do announce a number of programs, but we do it sporadically and they are fragmented and nothing really works out. So I think having inclusive education and seeing to it that inclusive education includes what you were talking about, health promoting schemes or health promoting peer educator programs. So if that is there, and sexual and reproductive health along with an understanding around gender becomes a component, and it's there, it's sustainable, and it's made sustainable, and I think it could also be tested. There's no reason why such education should not be tested. It should be tested, and in that sense it should follow up right down to your PhD levels. So medical college should have ethics, rights based approach, technological education should have it. Everywhere the ethics in the public domain should be around gender sensitivity.
Vijayalakshmi, you mentioned about accountability, something very dear to me, but the whole issue in this case is not identified accountability. It's an issue of social accountability, which includes so many stakeholders. But do you think that is only the government policies or the promotions or the advocacies or the laws are going to change this globally, not just in India?
Globally one has to understand there are different kinds of issues, and in the West, for example, till now they are still fighting for equal pay for equal work. We are not fighting for that. But on the other hand, if you take a look at India, the only 15% of women, I think that's the latest statistics that's coming from the Center for Women's Development Studies report, only 15% of women are in paid work. Earlier on, the UNDP report said 30%, but we're looking at 15%. So in a situation where the numbers are speaking for themselves, I think the accountability does lie with policymakers, it does lie with the families, it does lie with educational institutions. And I think that accountability is important because you have a scoreboard which is telling you that we are doing the worst when it comes to women. So if the scoreboard is telling you that, then I think the accountability can easily be fixed. It's not as if we are speaking in abstract. You're looking at 18 girls per 1,000 boys to almost no girls in certain villages in Punjab and Haryana. You are looking at a marginal improvement in the adult sex ratio, even that is low. You're looking at 15% of women in paid work. You're looking at gross great violence against women. I don't know what the statistics are. Every woman is raped in 3 minutes or something like that. You're also looking at absolutely no elderly care. There is no social security for the elderly, and women actually face the worst brunt of it. You're looking at farmers' suicides, but what we don't realize is that a large number of women are farmers in India, and they are those who did not die. So you're looking at a situation like that, so I think it's time we fix accountability. And every one of us is accountable, whether it's the state or it is the civil society. But how does one fix accountability? Within the government structure, it's much easier to fix accountability. But within society, it is difficult. But I'm sure there are ways in which it can be done. And Latin American countries have done that. Ways of fixing at least reciprocal obligation. So if you're receiving this from the state, this is what you have to deliver. So probably we need to work on some kind of a conditionality, eligibility, rather than just looking at fixing numbers in terms of population. We should look at fixing the status of women.
Okay, let me divert a bit. What do you do in these camps which you organize for female against female infanticide?
We work against sex selection, which is what I was talking about terminating females, if terminating fetuses if they are found to be female. Well, what we try to do is we want to talk about the value of the girls. Why it is important for us to understand that the girl is also a person, that she has certain rights and she has a right to be born and a right to equal concern and equal respect and equal dignity, and that right has nothing to do with the fact that she is worthy of it. All human beings are worthy of being born, and she is being guaranteed that by the Constitution. So we do awareness, we talk about these issues with young people because we think it's best to catch them young because they are still not polluted by the understandings around them. So when you catch them young, they are more idealistic, they are ready to do that, and we hope that when they have families, and since they are the ones who will decide the next census, we will see an improvement in the sex ratio. So we do that.
Let me share a secret with you now. Why I chose to talk to you was also for this reason, that you have a girl child, but you did not go for a boy thereafter. Was that consciously, or do you sometimes think I should have had a son also?
No, I never thought that. I think fact is that I think that never occurred to me. But if I had had a boy, then perhaps I would have thought of having a girl. But having a girl, I think, made my family feel most complete. And I think there should be more children in the world because children bring hope to the world. I have nothing against boys, except that I don't think a gender of a child makes a difference about loving the child. And it's important to love your child, whatever gender that is, whether it is male, female, or it is even a third gender. So I think it's important that we love a child for who or what he or she is. So in that sense, in my own understanding of life, I think every sense, whoever is born is to be loved. So, but as a matter of joke, when some people ask me that you should have had a son, then I ask them, why should I have had a son? They tell me, no, even if it's not for the gender inequality and gender stereotyping reasons, for variety, they tell me. I said, for variety, I have kept a dog at home. So if it is only a question of variety, then we should love animals, we should love nature. There is so much more to do with our lives. I think even at this stage, I feel that even reproducing your own child is a matter of selfish interest. So I would definitely think that adoption is a better option, but in my own life I did not do it. So I'm also guilty of that. But yes, I don't see any distinction between a boy or a girl. It's how you bring up the child, and if the child believes in equality, that's beautiful.
Okay, Vijayalakshmi, last but important question. What has changed around you, and what should have changed hasn't changed?
Well, what has happened is that we have a lot of consumerism. We have a market which provides you with huge varieties of things. But what hasn't changed is that this market continues to remain in nexus with patriarchy. So it's actually patriarchal values have got importance through the market, and the market has actually enhanced patriarchy. So it's like a Karwa Chauth capitalism. That's the way which the market has grown. So instead of making more choices for women and making it more progressive in that way, it has actually led to a kind of a nexus of capitalism with patriarchy. But what has changed, and what was there earlier also, is that women want to be at the forefront. They want to, and they're able to get out now. That particular battle is over. They're out in the public, they were going to schools, they were going to educational institutions, they want to do jobs. So they are demanding for more rights. They were demanding earlier, and now also there is a huge demand. Some men have also changed, and some men had already changed. So we do have men who walk side by side with us. I think it's always going to be like this. It's not going to change. So what we need to keep on doing is to access and ask for more rights. That's going to continue. The struggle has to go on. But also we need to have more movements. It cannot come through NGOs. It cannot come through only governments. Movements have to keep demanding.
Thank you, Vijayalakshmi, for your time. I hope we got some thought-provoking comments from you on this. Thank you.